"Get out of here, Grandma," the officer sneers, shoving the 90-year-old woman. Her frail body stumbles, her treasured flag falling to the dirt. He has no idea this grandma is a decorated war heroine who just sealed his fate. "What do you think you're doing, ma'am? This area is closed." The voice was sharp, laced with an impatience that cut through the crisp morning air. 90-year-old Evelyn Reed, her frame delicate but her posture unyielding, clutched a small, meticulously folded American flag to her chest. She stood before a temporary chain-link fence that cordoned off the town's Veterans Memorial Park, a place she had visited like a sanctuary for over 70 years. Today, it was a chaotic construction site, marked for what the city council called a revitalization, a corporate-sponsored modern art installation that felt like a betrayal to Evelyn. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. She hadn't intended to cause any trouble. She only wanted to find a small, dignified spot, a patch of earth near the granite stones etched with names, to place her flag. It was a silent promise, whispered in the frozen mud of a forest half a world away, and it was a promise she intended to keep. The young police officer, whose name tag read Miller, took another aggressive step toward her. He couldn't have been older than her own grandson. "I said, this area is restricted. You need to move along." Evelyn flinched, not from fear, but from the sheer, unadulterated disrespect that radiated from him like a bitter cold. Her grip tightened on the worn fabric of the flag. "Please, officer," she began, her voice a little shaky but clear. "I just need a moment to honor them." Officer Miller was a man who saw the world in black and white, rules and infractions. In his eyes, this old woman was an infraction. He glanced at his older, more weary-looking partner, Kate's, who stood back, observing with a practiced neutrality. "Ma'am, your moment is obstructing a lawful city project," Miller said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Whatever you're doing can wait. The park will reopen eventually." Evelyn's gaze swept over the churned-up earth, the skeletal metal framework of the impending sculpture, and the callous way the construction equipment was parked near the memorial wall itself. It was a desecration. This park wasn't just stone and bronze to her, it was sacred ground, a repository of ghosts and echoes where the past breathed alongside the present. She knew with a certainty that settled cold in her bones that this revitalization was an erasure of memory. The art installation, funded by a tech giant, would swallow the quiet dignity of the space, replacing solemn remembrance with flashy, empty spectacle. She had to place her flag today. The anniversary demanded it. "It can't wait," she said, her voice now firm. She took a tentative step toward a gap in the fence, hoping to reach a small rose bush that still clung to life just inside the perimeter. "It's important." Miller scoffed, a small, ugly sound that made Evelyn's heart ache. "Important? It's a construction site, sweetheart. Nothing important is happening here except what the city has sanctioned. You need to leave. Now." A small knot of bystanders had begun to gather. A mother pulling her child closer, a businessman frowning at the delay, a few teenagers smirking and raising their phones to film. The humiliation stung Evelyn more than the sharp wind that whipped around the corner. She wasn't a troublemaker, she was a woman of peace, of quiet remembrance. But this flag, this small square of fabric, represented something inviolable. It was a testament to a life given, a promise kept. She tried to appeal to the other officer. "Please," she said, looking at Kate's. "Just let me place it by the roses. It will only take a second." Officer Cates shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting from Evelyn to his partner. "Miller, maybe we just let her." "No," Miller barked, his patience, already wafer-thin, snapping completely. He saw not a 90-year-old woman, but a challenge to his authority. He moved with a speed that was shocking, lunging forward not to guide her away, but to end the confrontation. He didn't grab her arm. He swatted at her hands. "I said, drop it." The blow was clumsy but forceful. It struck Evelyn's aged, wrinkled hands, and the flag, her precious flag, was knocked from her grasp. It fluttered in the air for a heart-stopping moment before landing softly, tragically, in the damp dirt by the curb. A collective gasp went through the onlookers. The smirks vanished from the teenagers' faces, replaced by wide-eyed shock. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. For Evelyn, time itself warped. The sight of the flag in the mud, the smell of the damp earth, the distant rumble of a generator, it all converged into a single, piercing sensory flash. Suddenly, she wasn't in a park in 2025. She was in a makeshift field hospital in the Ardennes forest, the winter of '44. The air was thick with the smell of blood and pine, the ground frozen and unforgiving. The constant, terrifying rumble of artillery was the soundtrack to her life. She could feel the biting cold through her worn uniform, see the exhausted, frightened faces of the young men she tended to. "Ma'am. Are you listening to me?" Miller's voice dragged her back to the present. He was standing over her, his face red with frustration. "Now look what you made me do." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, hot and angry. The indignity was a physical blow. She bent down with a pained groan, her old joints protesting, to retrieve her fallen treasure. Her trembling fingers brushed against the soiled fabric. This was more than disrespect. It was a desecration of memory itself. "How dare you," she whispered, her voice cracking with a pain that went far beyond the physical. "That's it. You're causing a public disturbance," Miller declared, his authority now fully asserted. He reached for his handcuffs, the metal glinting menacingly. "You're coming with me." He grabbed her thin wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. The cold bite of the metal touched her skin. Officer Cates finally stepped forward. "Miller, for God's sake, stop. She's 90 years old. You can't arrest her." But Miller was on a power trip, fueled by the perceived defiance of this frail old woman and the audience she had attracted. "She's obstructing and refusing to comply. It doesn't matter how old she is." His face was inches from Evelyn's, spittle flying as he spoke. "What's so special about this old rag, anyway? You old-timers and your sentimentality." The pressure in Evelyn's chest was immense. She felt dizzy, the faces around her blurring. She could hear the concerned murmurs of the crowd, the weight of decades of memories she had fought so hard to contain threatening to overwhelm her. The first click of the handcuff echoed in the stunned silence. Suddenly, a different sound cut through the tense atmosphere. It wasn't the familiar yelp of more police sirens, but a deeper, more powerful thrum. Heads turned. Down the street, moving with an unnerving speed and precision, came a convoy of 3 sleek, black SUVs. They didn't slow, didn't signal. They simply turned and pulled up sharply, their tires barely making a sound as they formed a perfect line, blocking the entire width of the street. Their tinted windows reflected the shocked faces of the onlookers and the suddenly hesitant police officers. The world seemed to hold its breath. Doors opened with a quiet, pneumatic hiss. Several men in dark, impeccably tailored suits emerged. They moved with an economy of motion, earpieces glinting, their eyes scanning the scene with an unnerving intensity that spoke of Secret Service or high-level military detail. The casual arrogance of Officer Miller visibly deflated as this new, unknown power dynamic asserted itself on his street. One man, slightly older than the rest, with the quiet, indisputable authority of a commander, stepped out from the lead vehicle. He was in a civilian suit, but his bearing, the set of his jaw, the way his eyes assessed every detail in an instant, screamed military. He paused for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the cordoned-off memorial, the confused crowd, and the 2 police officers. His focus finally landed on the small, hunched figure of Evelyn Reed, who was now struggling to stay upright as Officer Miller fumbled with the handcuffs on her fragile wrist. The man's expression, previously neutral, tightened. A deep line appeared between his brows. He began to walk towards them, his polished shoes making no sound on the pavement. The crowd parted for him instinctively, like water for a ship. Officer Miller looked up, startled and annoyed by the interruption. "Hey, this is a police matter." "Stay back," he blustered, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. The man in the suit ignored him completely. His eyes were fixed on Evelyn. As the man drew closer, a look of stunned disbelief, then dawning recognition, spread across his distinguished features. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze softening as he took in Evelyn's distressed state, the tear in her old coat, the way the other officer was trying to cuff her. His eyes then fell to the dirt-stained flag she still clutched desperately in one hand. He looked at her face again, at the lines etched by time, but also at the fierce, unbroken spirit in her watery blue eyes. It was a look he knew. He'd seen it in a faded photograph on his grandfather's desk for his entire life. "Excuse me, ma'am," the man said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly, cutting through all other noise. "Your name, it wouldn't be Evelyn Reed, would it?" Evelyn looked up, her vision blurred by tears of frustration and a dawning, disoriented hope. How could this stranger know her name? "Yes," she whispered. "It is." The man's face was a storm of emotion. He moved swiftly, stepping between Evelyn and Officer Miller. With a gentle but firm hand, he pushed Miller's arm away. "Unhand her, officer." It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with an authority that brooked no argument. Miller, dumbfounded, momentarily froze. The man reached down and, with a decisive click, removed the handcuff from Evelyn's wrist. He then gently placed a supportive arm around her shoulders. "What in God's name is happening here?" he asked, his gaze now turning cold and hard towards the two policemen. "This woman was causing a disturbance, sir," Miller stammered, his bravado gone. "She refused to leave a restricted area." The man, Lieutenant General Miller of the United States Army, straightened to his full height. He seemed to tower over the officers. He turned to the crowd, his voice ringing with a power that commanded absolute silence. "This woman," he began, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury, "is not just a citizen. In front of you is Evelyn Reed. A hero of the United States Army." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Phones that had been recording for amusement now recorded in stunned reverence. "Do you know what she did?" the general continued, his eyes boring into Officer Miller, who looked as if he might faint. 79 years ago, in the frozen hell of the Ardennes forest, during the Battle of the Bulge, Nurse Evelyn Reed ran through mortar fire and artillery barrages, time and again, to drag wounded soldiers to safety. She set up a triage unit in a bombed-out church and worked for 3 days straight, without sleep, saving countless lives while the battle raged around her. For her gallantry in action, far above and beyond the call of duty, she was awarded the Silver Star. Another wave of shock washed over the crowd. The general then knelt down, his expensive suit creasing, and gently picked up the soiled flag from the ground. He held it with a reverence that shamed everyone who had watched it fall. "And this flag," he said, his voice cracking. "This old rag, as I believe I heard one of you call it. One of the men she saved that day, a young private who had been given up for dead, was my grandfather. Before they evacuated him, he gave her this flag, his most prized possession, and made her promise to remember all the boys who wouldn't be coming home." Silence. Absolute, profound, and heavy with shame. General Miller carefully folded the flag and presented it to Evelyn. Then, he took a step back. In the middle of the street, in front of the crowd, the police, and his own men, the three-star general from the Pentagon snapped to attention. He raised his hand to his brow and rendered a sharp, perfect salute to the 90-year-old nurse. The image was seared into the memory of everyone present, a powerful general saluting a frail, elderly woman, a silent, profound apology for the indignity she had suffered. The message was unmistakable. True honor was not in a uniform or a badge of temporary authority, but in a lifetime of courage and sacrifice. Officer Miller's face was a mask of pale, dawning horror. Officer Cates stared at the ground, his shoulders slumped in the very picture of remorse. General Miller held his salute for a long moment before lowering his hand. He then turned to the two policemen, his voice devoid of its earlier emotion, now flat and chillingly authoritative. "Officers, you will escort Ms. Reed back to her home. You will give her a full and sincere apology. Then, you will report immediately to your precinct captain. Inform him that General Mark Miller will be in contact with him, and with the mayor's office, before the day is out. This desecration," he said, gesturing to the fenced-off park, "stops now." In the weeks that followed, the city was thrown into turmoil. The video of the general saluting Evelyn went viral, a potent symbol of justice served. True to his word, General Miller met with the mayor and the police chief. The controversial redevelopment plan for the memorial park was abruptly and permanently halted. The tech giant, facing a public relations nightmare, withdrew its sponsorship. An investigation into the backroom deals that approved the project was launched. Officer Miller and Officer Cates faced a disciplinary board. Stripped of his bravado, Miller offered a tearful public apology to Evelyn, which she accepted with quiet grace. Both officers were assigned to extensive retraining, focusing on de-escalation, community policing, and, most significantly, veteran sensitivity. The city council, under immense public pressure, voted unanimously not only to preserve the park but to refurbish and expand it. A new plaque was commissioned, telling the story of the heroic Army nurses of World War II. Evelyn Reed continued her daily walks, but things were different. People who had once barely noticed the quiet old woman now greeted her with nods of respect, with smiles, sometimes with a softly spoken, "Thank you for your service." They knew she was someone deserving of honor. At the rededication ceremony for the newly beautiful park, General Miller stood by her side. As a final tribute, a special honor guard of the Army's current nurse corps escorted Evelyn to the memorial wall. There, she finally, peacefully, placed her treasured flag at its base. Later, a young mother, the same one who had clutched her child in the crowd that day, approached Evelyn with her young daughter. "Ma'am," she said, her voice filled with respect. "Could you teach my daughter, could you show us how to properly fold the flag?" Evelyn smiled, a true, radiant smile. She took the fresh, crisp flag the little girl offered and, with patient, practiced hands, began to show her, transforming a moment of disrespect into a lesson of honor, ensuring the legacy of respect would be passed on. True heroes often walk among us, unassuming and silent. Their courage is etched not in bronze, but in the quiet dignity of their lives. Remember that the respect we show our elders, especially those who have sacrificed, is not merely a courtesy. It is a reflection of our own character and our nation's honor. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that remind us of the enduring power of the human spirit. Type "respect" in the comments if you believe the quiet sacrifices of heroines like Evelyn Reed should never be forgotten. Share this story if you agree that honor is earned through character, not demanded by a badge.